even if you have the ability to pay down your mortgage partially or fully, you should not pay down your mortgage because real estate is a good debt. You should always leverage using inflation, as well as leveraging is a very powerful tool. You can utilize facilities like insurance as well to safeguard your family's interest and estate planning. You will tend to realize that whenever you talk to business people, investors, you talk to owners with multiple real estate, when they make money from their businesses, when they make money from stock exchange, from other forms of alternative investment, they tend to want to take a portion of their profit and pump it into a harder asset that's more illiquid, like real estate. And because the pricing in Singapore is more stable, they want to tend to safe keep their wealth right here. Ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna start our Nuggets on the Go right now. This is Cracking the Code. I don't know which episode it is, but welcome for coming by on Nuggets on the Go. It's good to see you here. Back here, I'm recording. So I have Daniel with me in the studio doing OT overtime. And we're coming to the end of this year. So anyway, good to see everybody. Thank you for following us, Nuggets on the Go. Yes, let's kickstart. All right. Welcome back to Nuggets on the Go. Today we are going to talk about interest rates, and interest rates will stay. And the topic is that even though it stays, do not pay down your mortgage. And we're going to talk about 6 to 8 reasons on why we think that in terms of not paying down a mortgage might be more beneficial for you if, let's say, you're planning on thinking about real estate as a good debt, and with leverage, of course, with one of the key principle for property investment. And of course, this is a key question that a lot of people have in the high interest rates environment. And we have to track back to about 12 months ago, because since the beginning of this year, because of all the federal funds rates increasing ever since 2022 all the way until now. And of course, now there's been news at the point of recording that there might be a possibility of Fed pivoting, in the sense that pivot means that they might stop raising the federal funds rate, and we're going to see what will happen in 2024, whether will that stay put or you'll start to taper down. In fact, now across all the news, if you are looking at Fed's funds rate, there already has been a lot of news and analysis that very likely Fed will have to pivot. They cannot maintain a high interest rates environment for too long, and inflation is already starting to come down in US. We're going to see what will happen. But just in Singapore itself, Singapore has already reacted and strategized that by 2024, all mortgage rates will be based on SORA instead of SIBOR or SOR. SORA rates has already came down. Now, if you get a fixed rate for resale properties, it's already at about 3.1 to 3.2%. Of course, if you get a flexi rate, it's still close to about 4%, but you can already see that disparity starting from 4.2% at the start of the year, coming down to about 3.1%. And in fact, recently I saw some of the packages is hovering about 2.9 to 3% for fixed SORA rates. So there's a key functional difference between these two kinds of debt. Now, bad debt is of course what we call like your credit card debts, personal loans and all that. That's considered in the bad debt category. If you consider good debt, this is a category that is reserved primarily for real estate mortgage. Now, and the very first reason is that leveraging good debt can actually has a different growth rate. So if you talk about this, if let's say you have $1 million full cash sitting in your bank account, what will happen is that if you choose to pay down this entire $1 million property with your $1 million cash, and that gives you a 4% growth in terms of its pricing, your growth is technically over a period of 12 months at only 40,000 in terms of total quantum appreciation. However, even though on the surface it's 4%, but because of the fact that you have leverage, if you were to take a 75% loan and put in 25% down payment for this property, and we have to understand something about real estate is that how banks sees real estate loans in terms of mortgage loan is very different from personal or line of credit or credit card debt, is because real estate is a collateral. It's a physical, tangible asset that in the event of after 3 months, you cannot pay your installment, you cannot fulfill your obligation to the bank, they have the right to seize your property and force sell it And of course, when they force sell it, this property is valued at 100%. And they will then be able to retrieve the amount that you owe to them. So the collateral is a hard asset and is valuable in the eyes of the bank, which is why they are willing to loan you 75%. In fact, in the past, mortgage loans used to be 90% in the 2000 eras. And MAS has tapered it down from 90 to 85 to 80 to now at 75% because they want to make sure that there's financial prudency in terms of leveraging as well from local Singaporeans and of course property investors. This then shows that if you come in at 250,000, even though on the surface is a 4% growth in the total quantum price of this $1 million property, your growth is actually 16%. It's 4 times because you're putting in 1/4 of the requirement of the total valuation of this property to enjoy the 100% of this particular property. So 250,000 versus $1 million. And thus, it allows you 4x the amount of growth because you're leveraging 25% vis-a-vis 100%, which is 1/4 of it. And that's how we get 4 times. So if you look at this particular example, I think it's very easy to understand. 1 million, 4% growth is 40,000. But just based on the same 40,000, 250,000 versus the 40,000 growth annually is 16%. So you just take 40,000 divided by 250,000, that will give you 60%. Now, how does real estate leverage work? If let's say this is your first time thinking about real estate as a form of investment, or if it's your first property you are buying for own stay, but you also want to understand a little bit about how leverage works. Now, just for example, let's say last year, that is your first property, you purchase a property at $2 million. Let's say it's a 3-bedder, it's a brand new launch, for example. You put in 500,000 in terms of down payment, 25%. Of course, you have to take note, there is a buyer stamp duty, which is either 4%, 5%, or 6%, depending on the quantum of the price. You can refer to our previous episode on NOTG, or just head on to our plbinsights.com to look at some of the articles. You leverage 75% for the bank, which is 1.5 million. What is going to happen is this: if let's say after X amount of years, be it 3, 5, 8, or 10 years, this property appreciates by 20% to 2.4 million. And let's say in the year 2025, it appreciates to 2.4 million and you decide to sell it. What is going to happen is that $400,000 of appreciation belongs to you and you alone as the property owner. The bank, even though they loan you 1.5 million, they are only interested to take back the outstanding loan that you owe them. Maybe by 3 years' time, the outstanding loan has already dipped down to $1.4 million because you have paid installments over the last 36 months. And they will just take $1.4 million from your overall sale price at $2.4 million. And thus, if you notice, because you put in 500,000, and we haven't include, of course, like your property tax, MCST, and of course, interest fees, plus, of course, like the buyer stamp duty. But just by looking at this is just to let you understand that the banks do not need to share your profit. Profit belongs to the owner, even though you only put in 25%. Of course, the bank is interested also in the interest component of your monthly installment. So this is just an illustration on how leverage works in property investment. And thus, when your property appreciates, the bank don't need to share a profit. And of course, reason number 2, why it is good not to pay down your property is because inflation erodes debt as well. What do I mean by this? We call this real estate asset eating inflation for breakfast. Now, the asset price, let me go back to the example. The $2 million property, it is inflated by inflation. What do I mean by this? Now, inflation on the surface, you might just think about CPI inflation, consumer price index inflation. But take note, CPI inflation does not include real estate prices. If you just need to head down, type in CPI across all countries, whether it's US or whether it's Singapore, it does not include house prices. And that is the reason why over the last 3 years, even though landed property appreciated by 31%, even though private property, condominiums and apartments appreciated by roughly 26%, our CPI inflation is averagely at about 4 to 6%, example. And why is it that here, home prices inflates by so much, 20%, 30%, but CPI inflates by only single digit? Is because this price index is not inside CPI. However, asset prices are inflated for a various number of reasons. Number one, this is what we call a flight to safety kind of asset. You tend to realize that whenever you talk to business people, investors, you talk to owners with multiple real estate, when they make money from their businesses, when they make money from stock exchange, from other forms of alternative investment, because of volatility in the market and liquidity in the market, the more liquid a certain kind of investment is, the volatility tends to be there. They tend to want to take a portion of their profit and pump it into a harder asset that's more illiquid, like real estate. And because the pricing in Singapore is more stable, they want to tend to safekeep their wealth right here. And inflation also happens from fractional reserve banking. This is a banking system in the sense that the bank technically do not need that same amount of deposits to be there to loan out that amount to people who want to loan for mortgage loans or other kinds of loans. Fractional reserve banking basically has a multiplier, and that is how money supply is created. So basically, when a bank loans money out, the entire money supply inflates. And if you just have a look at our money supply index, let me just share with you very quickly right here. This is our money supply after QE in US, money supply in Singapore after QE in US. You just need to look at the graph after it has increased. And even with QT, though there was a slight dip, we were still at an all-time high. And you look at Singapore, this is just latest in July of 2023. Money supply has increased and is still at a very high level. This is what we mean by a combination effect of QE. Quantitative easing means printing of more money into the entire money supply system, and as well as fractional reserve banking, which is working always in the background. But of course, this is all economics terms. What's most important is that right now, of course, because that's like all economic stuff, but what's most important is to understand the fact that though your asset price is inflated, what's most important is to understand that your asset prices has been inflated and it will continue to inflate depending, of course, on other demand and supply factors as well. But your mortgage debt is also being eroded. And thus, because your inflation erodes your existing cash in the bank, it also erodes your mortgage loan that is tucked into your property. It only makes sense with this expansion in global money supply. And thus, it makes sense to pay your installment with weaker money. And thus, if let's say your loan tenure is 25 years or 30 years, it makes sense to pay your loan installment with weaker money in future rather than paying down your entire property with stronger money right now. Let's move on to number 3. Paying down your real estate good debt versus leveraging. Basically, your net worth remains the same. What do I mean by this? Now, if you pay down as much as you can, your liability, let's say for example, your property value now is $1 million. You pay down versus not paying down. And let's say you pay down, you have an additional $250,000 in a bank. You pay down the $750,000 loan downwards towards $500,000 versus the fact that, let's say, currently you owe $750,000, but you have an additional $250K, you live in the bank, you still take note that your net worth is still the same at $500,000 after lessing off your liability. So 1 million minus 500, you get 500. 1 million minus 750,000, you get 250, but plus your 250 cash in the bank, your net worth is still 500,000. So whether you pay it down or don't pay it down, your net worth is technically the same. Now, liquidity, of course, is more important than trapped equity as well. So if you look at this, having spare cash thus gives a lot of people more flexibility for rainy days. Let's say, for example, you're out of job for 12 months or 6 months. At least you have a certain level of liquidity to tide over the transition period at different seasons. So, for example, if somebody were to lose their job, they at least with the $250,000, they still will have a runway of 74 months or a period of 6 years to tide over the monthly installment. Now, reason number 5 is that with leverage, if you use facilities, for example, like term insurance or mortgage insurance, you technically leave more for your children as well. So let's have a look at this example. Now, scenario number 1, somebody with a property that's worth $1 million suddenly passed away. Their property loan is at $500,000. Technically speaking, the family that takes over this asset through the inheritance, through their will, they still have to service their loan because the loan is still there with the bank. It doesn't mean that the person passed away, the loan disappears. The loan is transferred towards the family members that's inheriting the property. So the children, the family will still have to pay the monthly installment continuously. If let's say the family cannot service this loan and they choose to sell off this property at $1 million less off the loan, they will have a balanced estate of $500,000 cash, which is why, for example, one, you see this right here. Imagine scenario number 2, this person were to leverage on insurance as a form of protection, or whether it's a mortgage insurance or term insurance. That's 2 different topics. Later, we can talk about that in a separate episode on which one will be better for you. But let's say, for example, the value is 1 million and they put in this person put in 25% down payment as cash and leverage 75% loan at 750,000, and they purchase a term insurance or mortgage insurance pack against the outstanding loan of 750,000. And what is going to happen is that, touch wood, if in the event if this owner passes away and passes this property to their family, the insurance released the entire 750,000 to the family, and they can then use this to pay off the entire property, and they can remain in their property, and yet at the same time they can still enjoy the $250,000 left in the bank for them. And thus, in totality, this property is being paid off, valued at $1 million, with 250,000 spare cash in the bank. Total is 1 mil plus 250,000. In the event if this family want to sell off the $1 million property, the $1 million property is full cash as well. And thus they have $1.25 million. Now, reason number 6 is that interest rates might come down eventually depending on Fed policy. Right now, fixed rate is at about 3.1 to 3.2%. Floating is at about 4%. But eventually, if it comes down, because it seems like after the rate hikes for the past close to around 18 months or it's already coming to 21 months already, ever since the start of 2022, it seems that Fed rates have peaked. And if it were to come down, what will happen in 2024 and 2025 is that then our mortgage interest rates will also have to adjust accordingly. And of course, with the introduction of SORA, rates are already de-linked from international interest rate, with SORA being the main rate for calculating mortgage interest rates. That's already like a cushion effect that our government has planned. So if you look at some of the rates right now, it's already hovering at about 3.2% for fixed rates, which is considerably attractive compared to 4% just at the beginning of 2023. And of course, resale sellers and developers will not sell cheap when interest rates were to come down. Let's say, for example, if you flip the newspaper tomorrow and it says that rates have dropped to 2%, what's going to happen is that buyers are going to be more motivated because they have more purchasing power. Because when you buy something at 2%, your installment is lower than if you buy a property at 4%. But of course, take note that even if, let's say today, we were to buy a property at 4% interest rate or 3.2% interest rates, if we take a 1-year lock-in kind of package, we can still refinance it if interest rates were to come down. So reason number 7 is that we only pay interest till the day we sell, not for the full period. Something to note is that there's this thing called the loading period. Usually within the first 4 years, your interest payments will be most at the start of your investment for the first 48 months thereabout. After that, towards the later portion, your interest rates compared to your principal amount will start to drop. And thus, let's say, for example, if you sell a property at 4th year mark, you technically only pay interest for the 48 months, because when you sell, that is the stop point of the interest payment inside your installment. Let's say if you sell at year number 8, you only pay interest for the first 8. You don't have to pay interest all the way until the end. And this is what we mean by the fact that you pay interest till the day you sell, not for the full period. And of course, number 8 is that right now there's a lot of interest offset accounts that's packed against the mortgage loan that you get from the same bank. So for example, if you go to certain banks, you take this mortgage loan facility, you take a loan from them, letter of offer, they will offer you, hey, do you want to open up another account? You have some cash in the bank. Why don't you put this cash inside this interest offset account? And then they can offset the certain amount of interest against your real estate property mortgage loan interest. And that's what we call the interest offset account facilities. Of course, you can speak to your relevant bankers with that. And that brings us, of course, with the 8 points on why we think that even if you have the ability to pay down your mortgage partially or fully, you should not pay down your mortgage, because real estate is a good debt. You should always leverage using inflation, as well as leveraging is a very powerful tool. You can utilize facilities like insurance as well to safeguard your family's interest and estate planning. All right, so we've come to the end of today's Nuggets on the Go. We hope to see you on the next one. And meantime, take care. Bye. And of course,